Conference, Pennsylvania, and we had it in Slippery Rock a few years ago. And as you know, Pennsylvania is named for William Penn. Well, actually, it's named for his father, who was also named William Penn. It gets kind of confusing, but William Penn, the son that the state's not named after, is the one who actually founded the province of Pennsylvania. And some people, you wonder, well, how did William Penn get a hold of all that land? And the answer is his father was a wealthy merchant and people owed him money. And one of the people who owed him a lot of money was the King of England, Charles II. And so he paid him off by giving him this chunk of the American colonies over there, gave him Pennsylvania. And then William Penn, the son, also founded the city of Philadelphia, in 1677, almost exactly 100 years ago, before the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The city of brotherly love. He wanted to create a holy experiment in tolerance. And he was a Quaker. In fact, he actually went to prison in England for his writings that were considered heretical to the Church of England. But when he got to America, he wanted religious tolerance. Although he did call the Catholic Church the whore of Babylon. You know, there's tolerance and then there's tolerance. And he was the guy on the Quaker Oats cereal until he wasn't. Nabisco said that he was for about 100 years, and they said, nah, it's not him. But he lived a good courtly life when he was here as the governor of Pennsylvania, and took a barge down a river every day and had lunch at the other end, and it was a good life. But then he made some very bad business decisions and lost his entire wealth and went back to England, where he died penniless. And he is buried in a Quaker cemetery just a few miles from G.K. Chesterton. So you can visit Chesterton's grave, and in 5 minutes you can visit William Penn's grave. But of course, we're not in Philadelphia. We're in King of Prussia. And King of Prussia isn't even a city or a town. It's a census-designated place, which means nothing. It doesn't mean anything at all. It's part of Upper Marion Township in Montgomery, the county of Montgomery. All right. And it turns out it wasn't even named after the King of Prussia. It was named after a pub. And the pub was named King of Prussia. Why? No one knows why. But there's a legend connected to it. Some Germans claim that it was originally built in East Friesland, Germany, and then transferred through England and then rebuilt in America, something like the Holy House that moved from Nazareth to Loreto, Italy. But that doesn't hold up very well, because historically we know it was built by a Quaker couple and then transformed into an inn, and it was called Barry's after Jimmy Barry, the guy who ran the inn. And then somehow it changed from the name Barry's to King of Prussia. And why? Again, the question. Well, there's no documentation, but it's a legend, and so there might be something to it. The story is that they wanted to entice some German settlers who were Hessian soldiers to fight for the rebels in the Revolutionary War, and the way they recruited them was they renamed the pub to King of Prussia, and, beer is a great recruiting method. George Washington drank at the pub on the way to Valley Forge. When Joe told me, we've got a really good conference venue, it's in Valley Forge, I go, great, Valley Forge. And then later I tell him, it's actually in King of Prussia. The inn still exists. You can't drink there, you can't stay there, you can't get a room there, but you can visit the Chamber of Commerce there. The Chamber of Commerce for King of Prussia, which doesn't exist. Now, if any of you know anything about Chesterton, and some of you do, you would know that it's a stupendous irony that we are meeting in a place called King of Prussia. Chesterton did not like Prussia. We're going to give out a new award, I think, for the best understatement during the conference. And right now, that one's in first place. Chesterton did not like Prussia. Our conference theme, of course, is faith and friendship. And that's actually what I'm talking about right now. I'm just getting to it. In fact, our first slide is going to be what G.K. Chesterton said about Prussia. Just as the king of Prussia isn't a real place, Prussia wasn't a real place either. It was an idea. Prussia is a patch of 18th century heathenry and heresy, which never did believe, nor, to do it justice, generally pretend to believe in any sort of international ideal or common code of Christendom. From the first command of Hohenzollern to the last appeal of Hitler, it is the most simple, one-sided, savage, tribal patriotism and nothing else. The consequence is that Prussia is the one European state that may at any moment wage an aggressive war. That's in 1933, he wrote that. Notice anything prophetic about it, those who actually read the line up there. He predicted that Prussia, in its latest rendition, Hitler and the Nazis, would be the aggressor in a new war. And though he didn't live to see World War II, Chesterton did see it coming. What else did he say about Prussia? Prussia was not a place that was civilized in a barbaric age, but a place which was still barbaric in a civilized age. Barbarism, let me remind you, is not paganism. Pagans are civilized. Barbarians are not. They are at war with civilization. They are motivated only by their appetite. And that is why their philosophy is completely materialistic. But it gets worse. The Prussian is not merely the barbarian, but rather he is the degenerate. The point can be proved by the perfectly simple fact that whenever you meet him, he's a little worse than before. Are we having a great time here tonight? This was a pamphlet that he wrote at the beginning of World War II in 1914. And so here he takes the Prussian down even a notch further than the barbarian. If there's something worse than a barbarian, it's a degenerate barbarian. All right, but then here's the, no, there's two more. The Prussian is a very bad persuader because he has followed the advice of Nietzsche. Now, what is remarkable about that one? Notice the date, 1914. It's at the outset of World War I, but already G.K. Chesterton sees the remarkable and egregious influence of Nietzsche who died in an insane asylum only 14 years before this. He was already, his ideas, which were insane, demonstrated by his life, even before they got him into the insane asylum, was already influencing Prussian thought. After World War I and the defeat of Germany, Chesterton warned that the Prussian threat had not gone away, and even though he uses the word Prussian, you just switch it with the word Nazi, and it's precisely and accurately prophetic. Astonishingly Nietzsche-like. Racial superiority, the rejection of Christian morality, beyond good and evil, the idea of endless progress, progressivism, endless improvement. This is what the Nazis preached. But this is also what the German professors preached. And while the Nazis lost the war, the German professors not only survived, they thrived. They brought Nietzsche and his ideas to all the European and American universities, and they won the war that their country had lost because they won the minds of the next few generations. The Prussian is in the classroom still, and he's there via Nietzsche. And as Chesterton says, whenever you meet him, he's a little worse than before. If the world had remained Catholic, the Prussian power would not have appeared at all. We're going to go full-on ecumenical now. Prussianism is undeniably a direct descendant of the Protestantism which was born in Germany. There'd be no Prussia without Martin Luther. And there'd be no king of Prussia if the world had remained Catholic. And I suppose, though, if there had been no king of Prussia, we wouldn't be here because there is no here. And we wouldn't have a conference. So, oh, happy fault. So who was the king of Prussia? Frederick the Great, Frederick the First. So for some reason called the Great. If there's one thing that Chesterton detested more than Prussianism, it was Frederick the Great, whom he called a Protestant who was not even a Christian, and who did more to shape the modern world by dragging down Catholic Europe and the Holy Roman Empire than just about anyone else. Just as all Christian history begins with the happy reconciliation of Herod and Pilate, so all modern history, in the recent revolutionary sense, begins with that strange friendship of Voltaire and Frederick the Great. But because that birth was monstrous and evil, because true friendship and love are not evil, it did not come into the world to create one united thing, but two conflicting things, which between them were to shake the world to pieces. From Voltaire, the Latins learned they were to learn a raging skepticism. And from Frederick, the Teutons were to learn a raging pride. The root of both perversions is in the common ground of atheist irresponsibility. There was nothing to stop the skeptic from turning democracy into secrecy. There was nothing to stop him from interpreting liberty as the infinite license of tyranny. The spiritual zero of Christendom was at that freezing instant when two dry, thin, hatchet-faced men looked in each other's hollow eyes and saw the sneer that was as eternal as the smile of the skull. Between them, they have nearly killed the thing by which we live. So now we have finally arrived at the conference theme, faith and friendship. Came in through the back door. Let's unpack this little passage from Chesterton. He says that modern history begins with the friendship of Voltaire and Frederick the Great. And of course, that amazing line of the description of these two really soulless souls looking at each other, the skeptic and the proud German who doesn't believe in God. They created the things that have created the modern world, skepticism and pride, and they have shaken the world to pieces. And what they have in common is this atheist irresponsibility, because not believing in God means not being accountable to God or to anyone. And liberty became license, and license becomes tyranny. And it has nearly destroyed the thing by which we live. And the thing by which we live is faith. Faith is the opposite of skepticism. But faith also requires humility. It's the opposite of pride. And friendship, too, is humble work. It means to rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. And again, the opposite is pride. Pride is the deadliest of the deadly sins. But proud is not a word that we can ever use to describe G.K. Chesterton. The late, great Aidan Mackey, rest his soul, described Chesterton as a tower of humility. And his humility is evident in everything he writes. It's evident also in all the stories about him. Shortly after Chesterton moved to Beaconsfield, he said to a fellow resident, in order to introduce himself, he says, "When I sit by the wayside, the villagers look, and they take me for one of two things. They either take me for the village idiot or for one of Herod's delivery vans." But you know, it's Chesterton's humility. That's one of the reasons that we are drawn to him. We're drawn to that very wonderful characteristic, that wonderful virtue that is so attractive in Chesterton. And that's why he's such an important ally to us, such an important advocate for us in the battle that we are fighting. Because the battle that we're fighting is against pride. Whether it's gay pride or racial pride or just satanic pride or the worst of all, our own pride. We're fighting a battle. And we need Chesterton's humility as one of our most important shields and swords. Christendom has a new battle before it. No longer with the lust that was called liberty. No longer with the scorn that was called skepticism. No longer with the envy that was called divine discontent. But with something much less mixed with sympathetic elements than any of these. With that primeval spirit and prince of the powers of the world, which it first came upon earth to defy. The free thinkers of the future will care nothing for freedom and very little for thought. They will tell us that thought must be subject to will, and that will is whatever they want, or whatever they want it to be. The alliance between skepticism and democracy was wholly accidental. The new skeptics will be more skeptical of democracy than of anything else. They will be skeptical of everything and everybody except themselves. The church will defend all that is left of democracy, as in the last century when she defended all that was left of loyalty. A pagan pride, freed from democratic as from religious restraints, is the next foe we have to face, and it may be hoped in whatever form that we shall all face it together. Now let that one sink in, my friends. It's hard to imagine, of course, exalting lust and calling it liberty. That would never happen. Or exalting scorn and calling it skepticism. That would never happen. Or exalting envy and calling it divine discontent. Or attacking freedom and actual reason and calling it free thinking. But imagine, the new skeptics will be more skeptical of democracy than of anything else. Not going to say anything else. That's all I'm going to say. I'm just going to say imagine. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the next slide. Common ground seems to me to be giving way under the feet of mankind at this moment. The combination of expansion of geographical knowledge with the wavering or wobbling of ethical or theological knowledge brings people up against other people whom they have never attempted to understand and even now have no real intention of understanding. Just think of the division in our country right now. Just think of the amazing division. And it's because we have lost our common ground. And it's a result of this expansion of geographical knowledge with the wavering or wobbling of ethical or theological knowledge. So that people are not even speaking to each other in the same terms, because the language itself is under attack. We don't have common ground because we don't even have a common language, because we're changing the meanings of words. We're changing pronouns. We've lost our common understanding of things. We've lost common sense. That's why we need the apostle of common sense. We've lost our common ground because we've lost our faith because of a wobbly theology. And we've literally lost our common ground because we've lost our ground, which is localism, and owning the things close to us that affect us the most. You can't have democracy without localism. What's the other challenge to democracy? The inner weakness of our society today is that it has lost not only its faith in God, but its faith in man. This is why democracy is so difficult. We don't have faith in democracy anymore. We seem to think that we can be trusted to rule ourselves, but we never trust anyone else to rule themselves. And again, democracy has to start at the local level. It depends on subsidiarity and solidarity. Controlling the things that most directly affect you and having a common bond with those around you. There is no faith in freedom without faith in free will. We are definitely doing battle with all kinds of beliefs in fatalism and determinism, that I can't help the way I am, man. And a free will is under attack. And we expect people to take responsibility for their actions. That's normal. That's common sense, to expect people to take responsibility for their actions. For one thing, it makes it much easier to hate them when they're irresponsible. That is, when we can blame them for doing bad things because it was our own damn fault. It's more problematic when we have to take responsibility for our own actions, when we have to admit that some bad thing happened because we did it. What's wrong with the world? I am. Passing the blame is not a solution. But confession is. When we realize how much we need forgiveness, then we can begin to understand why others need forgiveness too. There are things which might conceivably and truly make men forgive their enemies. We can only turn hate to love by understanding what are the things that men have loved. Nor is it necessary to ask men to hate their loves in order to love one another. Just as two grocers are most likely to be reconciled when they remember for a moment that they are two fathers, so two nationals are most likely to be reconciled when they remember, if only for a moment, that they are two patriots. That's how we turn our enemies into friends. Democracy does depend on faith and friendship. Chesterton said earlier, we've lost our faith in God, we've also lost our faith in man. Ironically, the humanist worships man, but he's unfaithful to the thing he worships because so many people actually do worship God. And when we think of faith, we first think of God. Faith of its own nature wants to worship a real God. The opposite of a friend is an enemy, and the best way to eliminate an enemy is not to destroy him, but to make him into a friend. The opposite of faith is doubt. Doubt cannot build anything. Doubt can only destroy. Doubt cannot accomplish anything. It can only scoff at what might be accomplished and scoff even at what is accomplished. Doubt cannot edify. It can only discourage. Doubt really has no future. Which led Chesterton to say, I'm not at all disturbed about the future of faith, but I am disturbed about the future of the doubters. But of course, the scoffers will always have good material to work with because we keep providing it for them. And that's what we have to work on, is stop giving doubters reason to doubt. Stop giving scoffers reason to scoff. Give people a reason when they look at us in our lives to believe in God and to believe in the redeeming love of God, to believe in his one holy Catholic Apostolic Church. It is no disgrace to Christianity. It is no disgrace to great religion, any great religion, that its counsels of perfection have not made every single person perfect. If after centuries a disparity is still found between its ideal and its followers, it only means that the religion maintains the ideal and the followers still need it, which is another way of saying the Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It's been found difficult and left untried. Faith and friendship. That's our conference theme. And this is the Chesterton line that we've chosen to tie those two ideas together. It is only in God that we love each other. Does anyone know where that line comes from? No, it's from G.K. Chesterton. Who said St. Paul? Your fine is tax deductible, so it's okay. Don't worry about it. We like those donations. But come see me afterwards, okay? It's a Chesterton line. Anybody know where it's from? St. Paul. Whoa, we're making a lot of money up here tonight. Fantastic. Well, I'll tell you. The line is found in Macy Ward's book, Return to Chesterton, which was the sequel to her biography of Chesterton. And she said it was written for those who can't get enough Chesterton. In fact, I read that book myself before I read her biography of Chesterton. It kind of explains the way I do things backwards. But it's a marvelous book, a marvelous book. It's one of the books that I think we will be using a lot of evidence from to demonstrate Chesterton's heroic virtue and his true holiness. Because there's some great stories about his friendships and about even the way he worshipped. And they can only be found in that book. One of his great friendships was with Rand Kennedy. And Rand Kennedy and his wife Edith were newlyweds in the same block of flats with Gilbert and Frances when both couples first got married in Battersea. And Rand Kennedy describes some of his memories of knowing Chesterton for a lifetime. But then he says in the end of his reflection that he told Macy Ward that Chesterton was fed by a perpetual Eucharist. He was utterly aware of the thing, capital T. He brought contemplation down to this earth and made it a habit. He never thought of himself. He was spitting out fire from God. We have some copies of the book out there. Faith and friendship are shorthand for the two great commandments. Love God and love your neighbor. The two go together, of course. The hardest part of loving God and of loving our neighbor is asking for forgiveness. But loving our neighbor has the added difficulty of giving forgiveness. To a Catholic, it is the necessary system of religion that it is logical and marching and militant, but that the heart of all that system is a broken heart. The core of all that music, a breaking voice, and that the last reality is that which is the most personal, which is not only love, but pardon, which is to say, and why, it is only in God that we love each other. And which is why the Bible tells us to love our neighbors and to love our enemies, because generally they're the same people. Have a great conference, everybody. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, we have time for a quick bathroom break back here at 8 o'clock. So use the restrooms, help yourself to the vendor hall downstairs, take a look around there, and